Sounds good. All right, good evening, everybody. Tonight is January 22nd. It's the monthly meeting of the school uh, building committee and the permanent building committee. First item of the agenda would be to review and discuss the educational program comparison between options.
I think we have to call the select board meeting to
Oh,
order.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
I was going to let Ellen, but I'll make a motion to call the meeting. I'll call the meeting to order of the select board. Well, Ellen needs dinner. We don't need to
Want
make.
me to second it?
I don't think we need a motion. I think we just have to call it to order.
Okay, good.
I think the school
I'm
committee
gonna-
needs that too.
Thanks,
Yeah, it wouldn't
Robin.
hurt.
Yep.
So I'm gonna call the school committee to order, open the meeting.
All right, and now we'll pass it on to either Mike or Jeff from Vertex.
Surprised to have all three committees have a quorum tonight. It's great news. So we're an important juncture in the project where, the committee's done a lot of work over the past year and a half, or year plus, even since before we were on, to really evaluate various options. And so we're kind of in the narrowing phase tonight. We talked a lot at last month's meeting about the options and kind of the ones that were leading to the front of the pack. I asked the design team to bring some updates on one of the options we hadn't looked at in a while, which is A4A, AR4A. And so Chris is going to talk about that in terms of the design presentation. So the sub agenda to the posted agenda is essentially we're going to go through the design update. I'll give you an update on MSBA funding and feedback. Then I'll turn it over to Bob to talk about the educational program component of the project. And then Mike will pick back up talking about the evaluation matrix and the criteria that the committee has viewed to date. And we'll have a deliberation discussion and then open it up for questions. And if there is a motion to move forward, you may select an option tonight if that's the will of the committee. So with that, I'm going to share screen and kind of get started here. So again, there's the agenda I just reviewed with the group here. And so we're going to jump right back into it. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk about the floor plans of AR4A.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay, so here you're looking at the first floor of AR4A, and to remind you, the strategy here was that we would build an addition to the sort of south side of the building, more towards the field side. And the addition is highlighted in the pink dashed line that kind of goes around that section of building. The goal here was to add enough program where we could get the middle school separated from the high school, but orient them around the core, the center core of the school, which has all the shared components that the high school and the middle school would both use. And so, as we develop this, and if this becomes the option selected and it gets more developed in schematic design, whether the addition is the middle school or the high school really can be fine-tuned, but the addition speaking is really just saying half the school goes over there, and then the other half is in the renovated portion of the school. And then the remainder of the black dashed lines would be demolished, which is the portion of the building that extends kind of furthest down, the wing furthest down of the building right now. Included in the addition is a new gymnasium, and that move allows us to open up the existing space within the existing gym and make that a couple of different components, which is media center and also some PE alternatives, which are identified in the educational space program and the educational program as well. But all of those moves allow us to kind of meet the ed plan and ed program. And you can see that there's a number of classrooms scattered throughout. There's the science rooms that are the right sized in the green color. And then various support spaces like the teacher planning and resource rooms and other small group rooms throughout the building. Counseling center would actually be located on top. So the existing boiler room is a two-story space because you enter in and go downwards. but it's got the same ceiling height or roof height as the rest of the building. And so with the modern way we do all of the boiler capacity and energy stuff, we can actually get room back by infilling that floor and making that a counseling center. So that's kind of a neat addition to the building to be able to get counseling separate from the admin, but in a central location that can serve both schools, middle school and high school. So that's the first floor. Jeff, if you want to go to the second floor. This floor shows, again, similar floor plate because they stack really well. And so it's very simple to understand the building diagram. A couple of these spaces, just to kind of mention them, you'll see some diagonal walls within the floor plate. We're showing those to kind of meet program size and components that are identified in the space program. But if this becomes the preferred option, we can walk through different strategies like Jeff is highlighting. One of them is like a straight division of walls there for teachers and resource planning. And then the other approach is having some angled walls that help sort of get a more refined pathway for getting those components in. So there's two different ways to do that. And we'll work with you if this is the chosen option to kind of get to the bottom of what works best by showing you floor layouts and sort of functionality around that. But yeah, it's a fairly simple and efficient layout that is surrounds the core of the school and adds the gym and creates new space within the gym. So
can you just point out the handicap accessibility features? Where would they
yeah, so
be?
yeah, so we would be we would have one elevator in the existing portion of the building, and then the new addition portion of the building would also need an elevator over there to support that space. And that would help. Hang on, I'm gonna get my dog to hang
I
on
had
just
no
one second.
intention of bothering your dog. That was not the point.
Sorry about that. When you get a puppy for Christmas, you run into problems sometimes. So, so yeah, the handicap accessibility issues. So we would accommodate that in all of the door openings. So when you do the renovation portion, the door openings would accommodate that. The elevator accommodates that. And then the new addition would also comply because that's just how we would build it. But everything's level on the first floor, so there's no floor changes here. So it would just be a flat transition from the existing to the new, the addition part. And then on the second floor, you would have the two second floors don't actually connect between the addition and the renovation portion because there's just not a good way to make that connection. So those are two separate second floors there.
Thank you.
Chris, could I ask you a couple of questions?
Yes, ma'am.
The demolished classroom space will be used as swing space?
Well, not technically. The swing space would be the first phase of this building would be the actual addition.
Okay,
So whatever you call this addition to the south here, we would build that first, which then allows us to move. I would probably suggest the move would be you would
I'd
move
say
some
yes.
students over, then do the renovation portion, and then do demolishing at the end, because then that allows you to stay flexible without having to need to add modulars.
Right,
Okay.
but to Diane's
So-
point, that this allows us to do that. So
Yeah.
there's more spaces to be renovated than fit in this wing down here, the existing wing. But there's a potential that, the new addition comes online, we move into this, we keep this space alive, and then we start to renovate. But really, we're kind of decanting space into the addition once that's going. So really, as
Yeah.
Chris noted to, we take the addition over, we keep that live, and then we renovate this portion and then demolish it at the very end. So it
Okay.
acts kind of like swing space, but it's really the addition that is the swing space in this option.
And one other question, can you point out on the first floor where the entrances and exits are?
Oh, yeah. So we're proposing, there's a major entrance, the site plan actually has a drop off over where the demolished classroom building is. And so that would be kind of a nice central way to come in. And so you have an entry to the north to the existing building that's being renovated. And then you have an entry for the, let me see if I can do some markups here. So you have an entry right here and an entry right here, and your drop off is coming in like this. And so you create a nice central pathway for students to come in the building to their designated, grade level house, if you will. And those are the entries now, but you still have a public entry down here, which could be used for any visitors that need to access the building during the day. They would be checked in at the office over here, the main office. And then you have two public entries for so the parking lot still is down in this zone, big P here. And you still have two entries that can access this portion of the building for big events in the gym or the auditorium. And so you have different ways to get in for public versus school on the left side.
Thank you.
Chris, I know it's we're at the conceptual level, but where would you have the administration? And it's not really kind of called out in this option, but in the middle school wing or the addition wing, would that be central in the middle here? Or?
Yeah, so well, I would want to I'd want to get the administrators some natural light. So I think we got to work that out, but we've got the square footage in here, but you just tuck, probably what'll happen is we'll kind of squeeze things around and get offices with windows in various places, but what ends up, yeah, so you'll have basically that suite that's up on the second floor right now for the middle school, or if we've been talking about the middle school going here. But we would go through the space program, do the final programming meetings and schematic design, and really plan out where that wants to be. If it wants to be like on, this edge, or maybe it's tucked over here and we move the gymnasium up a little bit. We've got some flexibility there. Oh, and by the way, there's a superintendent's office and back of house over here in the addition. So this is another public entry for anybody needing to go to the superintendent's office. That's a dedicated place for that interaction. So I think we've got some flexibility on figuring that out. I don't have it sorted at this moment, but.
I have a question about the drop off thing that you just shared. I was just wondering if you thought it would bottleneck having both schools have the same drop off parking or like traffic thing. Right? Like you said that like curve is kind of on the bottom there and they enter left and right. So like I'm just wondering about like parent drop off and it being crazy with two school people dropping off like at the same time frame.
We don't anticipate that to be the problem or be a problem. We've had the traffic engineer look at this. When we get into schematic design, they actually do what's called a traffic impact study. It's a TIS report, where we can get more in the weeds of how buses interact with cars and all of that. And
Is the bus
I wouldn't
dropping off at the same place too?
Well, we've got a couple of options. One, I think I think you can separate buses by having some, like the buses parked on the road between Clyde Brown and this, or have parents come in from.
Chris, do you have the site plan handy?
I was gonna look that
Robin,
up.
we looked at a couple of options. One was, keeping the drop off existing as Chris just started to draw between the Clyde Brown and the high school entrance.
Yeah.
We actually carved out a drop off lane. I think that was for buses in an earlier scheme.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm coming on new here.
No, it's okay. Like, I mean, this is the point where we talk about all that, right? It's relevant.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we
Just
want to make
I'd
sure.
also say that there's a lot of the high school kids take their own vehicles. So there's still that parking area in front
correct.
that, so those kids would be accessing the start of the day from some of those other doors.
Other doors. Okay. I teach at a school where it's a constant problem. The parent drop off gets in the way of teachers arriving, and I just want to make sure that we're thinking about that going in.
Absolutely. Just give me 2 minutes here and we can take other questions. I'm looking for the site plan, so I just need to look that up real quick.
Yeah, I was trying to find the most recent one too.
Are there any other questions while I'm looking that up?
I'd like you to speak a moment about security. If we have all these multiple alternative entrances here, how's that gonna work?
Okay, right. So the big thing about security is during the influx of students in and out. So that's two big moments there, the pickup and the drop off. If they're coming in the locations I described earlier, those doors would be programmed to be open. A lot of times there's some professional teacher or staff member that are at those doors during those periods of time, whether it's a principal greeting students or just, other staff members. But when after that 10-15 minute sequence of arrival or departure, those doors are locked and you wouldn't be able to get into those unless you had a key card access or a physical key to get in. And so everybody would be directed around to the main entry for the building where it is today. And if you have a meeting or something like that, you would be directed to go there as a visitor first to check in, and then the appropriate person that you're meeting, maybe it's an IEP or other kind of meeting, you would be directed to go to the conference room or the place where you're meeting those people. So the idea is that no visitors arrive anywhere except for the main entry, and we would have site signage and everything accordingly. And then in that moment, we also have the layered security design that's both camera access control and sort of more passive elements like the double door vestibule type situation. You have to be buzzed in twice to get in, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
That's kind of what we have now, Jim.
Yeah.
Kids come in the morning, they come in multiple doors, but then at 8:10, everything locks down. And if you want to go to the high school, you have to buzz into the high school office. If you want to go to the middle school, you have to go to the middle school entrance. And all those areas have buzzers and cameras.
Okay. Just that I thought there were basically three main entrances under the existing, but maybe I got it
Right,
wrong.
yeah, you're correct. So high school would go to high school office, middle school buzzes into the middle school, and then central office, there's a door buzzer in there with a camera
Okay.
too.
Okay, thanks.
Earlier version. I don't know if you have.
Well, I think on this, I understand the concept of showing it. I think part of the exercise would be that we will explore that. We had initially looked at it a while ago, meaning where the bus lanes went. They were in the front. We talked about adjusting the island and making maybe a pass-through lane in the front. And Chris had looked at different traffic patterns, but that'll all be studied, going forwards if this option would be chosen. So
Just to put in perspective, this was an earlier version of it, but
Correct.
it was we'd carved out the bus lane here, kind of come in, they pull over, you have a kind of a curb
yeah.
barrier so that
That's
cars can actually go around. The area under the middle school becomes a parking lot, and this is that turnaround loop. I don't think we currently have all this paving in the current number right now, so we'd probably do a refined version of this. There's a lot of asphalt in this earlier concept, but that was the original idea. And then back of house, the superintendent's office is kind of shifted over here as Chris showed in the updated plan. So that kind of changed the geometry of this end of the site as well. But the original concept was this kind of pass through, buses could continue on past Clyde Brown, and then parent pick up and drop off, kind of get segregated away from the buses.
Thanks. Again, as like a teacher, if I'm going to park in that lower parking lot down there, I'm like gonna get stuck in that parent circle traffic trying to get in and park down there. That's just my thought.
We'll address that when if this.
Yeah.
It goes down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parking and traffic is a real issue at every single school project.
100%, 100%.
It'll never be perfect. None of us here are going to promise that because you're penned in with all the existing features of the site, right? Between the Clyde Brown, the property lines, the athletic field, and the brook, right? So we're going to come up with a concept that works, right? But
Yeah, for sure.
There'll always be inconvenienced people, right? And those people will figure out where to park on the days they need to get out early. And that's just the reality of working in a school system.
Mm.
And I'd also say that, you know, we don't open our doors till 7:40. So most of the teachers are in at 7:45. You know, the kids start really coming in at around 7:50. So we don't have a lot of problems with teachers like
Okay,
competing with kids and parents for getting in.
okay.
All right, I think Chris, we pretty much wrapped up that. Was there any other questions from the group?
Any questions on design or floor plans? When we get to the end of the presentation, we start to talk about the deliberation, the evaluation. We can bring up the floor plans again at that point and kind of click through them. All right. So from there, I'm going to take back over, and again, we can take all the questions you guys want for design in a minute. I'm going to zoom out for a second so this fits. So these next couple of slides are things I showed to the committee, you know, a year plus ago when you guys hired us, a year and a half ago. And it's a little bit about the MSBA's process. And so it talks about at a high level, there are things that are categorically ineligible. There are things that they deemed ineligible because they exceed the cap or they don't fit within their program. And then there are things that are just excluded costs, right? And so what that is first with the categorically ineligible. So things they don't participate in are legal fees, offsite improvements, turf fields, stadiums, or amenities, which would be applicable to the new construction option where you would knock the building down. Utility company back charges, swing space and modulars, which apply to all the ad renos or the renovations, local permanent costs, any bond borrowing, financing costs, site remediation, asbestos containing floor tiles, although they do participate in most of the abatement and demo of a building. And then your case, you're not really considering an auditorium for the middle school, only in the new construction option, but because it's a middle high, that wouldn't really be applicable. And then district administration offices is applicable to every option. And so those are some of the areas where they start to carve out square footage. And that list is important because when I start to get to what the potential rebate reimbursement will be later on in tonight's presentation, those are some things that are just floating around in the background as to the why. So the MSBA's cost cap, so outside of those categorically ineligible things, they cap out various elements of the project. And so the more expensive the job is, the more you start to hit some of these caps. And so, you know, soft costs exceeding 20%, you know, we're not hitting that one. Owner's project management and designer fees, they cap that at $550 a square foot times the size of the building. So you'll likely be over those by some amount in each of the options. Building square footage costs that exceeded $550, that was last updated in 2023. And the site cost at $55 a square foot, last updated in 2023. The furniture and technology has never changed. It's been that since the inception of the MSBA in 2008. So, you know, consider it like a donation. You know, that's the value they put on that equipment and furniture. And then change orders that exceed 1% of construction. If you do the ad reno, they do allow a little more. I think it's 2% for the ad reno. So I should update that for a future slide. But the good news is something changed. And so what they did was they just voted to effective January. Any project that does not have a scope and budget agreement will now, the building cost will go up to $586 and the site cost goes up to $59. So what it effectively means is that you'll get $40 back per square foot of the project more than you would have last year. And so that's great news. And so I've updated some of the numbers you're going to see in a moment from what I presented to the committee last month to what's going on now. Now, you wouldn't have submitted for the project and scope and budget until August, so you're gonna be guaranteed, but anybody that submitted for December is out of luck. Right, so the projects from January forward will be new in the new program in terms of dollars per square foot. Your reimbursement calculator, you're at 53.53% as a baseline. That's a socioeconomic demographic. They assign that to every city and town in the state, and they refresh it every January. It may move, you know, a tenth or 0.02. So at some point this year, we'll get an update on that, but it's plus or minus, you know, 0.02 of that number, I would say. At the moment, you're not planning on going full sustainable with geothermal and all electric and those types of projects that would have the real energy drivers there. And so that's a 3.5% to 4% increase, but we're not pursuing that as part of the project. They evaluate you on your maintenance score, how well you maintain your existing program. Back on Clyde Brown, they assigned a 1.38 out of potential 2 points. So I'm carrying that now. There will be an update for that we'll receive this year. And then the big thing to consider for your project is that ad renos, they give you anywhere from 0 to 5% incentive to renovate an existing structure because they know that's challenging. They know there are trade-off costs that they don't participate in, like swing space modulars. And they want to keep assets if they can. But, you know, that comes with some higher costs and trade-offs. So for today's discussion, I'm saying that we're basically at 2% for all the options except for the new construction. And why I've kind of landed there as a metric is that, you know, with the new option 4A, you're essentially renovating and replacing 40% of the building. So that's kind of where I landed on the 2%, with 2% for the part that you're renovating, the major renovations. And then you're replacing 40% of the building, and then you're maintaining about 20% of those common spaces, which is the auditorium, the gymnasium, and the cafeteria. And so with the renos, you know, I think it'll be a lower number because you're not doing as much of a major renovation to those buildings. And then with the ad renos, it's a kind of a varying degree. I picked 2%. I think that's a safe spot for today. It may go up, it may go down, depending on what option ultimately gets picked. What that means is your effective, your baseline reimbursement is somewhere between 56 to 58%. But there's an effective rate, which is different, which is once you take that 58, you multiply it after you've taken out all those caps and exclusions for the slide that we just talked about it. So your effective rate ends up being a lot less than 58%. You know, it's in the high 30s or low 40s, which we'll talk about in a second. So this slide, I know there's a lot of text here. It's quoted from the MSBA, so it's in your packet for those of you at least on the SBC, and I can leave behind this for the other committees that have attended tonight. But we asked the MSBA poignantly, if we went with a renovation only option, which is what the committee was exploring since this past summer, what would you participate in? And so what they did is they challenged us back and said, well, tell us how it meets the original invitation, right? You submitted this statement of interest and said that, you know, our science program is undersized and inadequate. Our enrollment is growing. You know, obviously windows and HVAC need to be replaced and a whole bunch of other deficits that exist in the school today. So they invited you on a need basis based on those elements. And so the participation moving forward needs to make sure it satisfies those elements. So they put the charge back on the district and the project team to show how we're actually satisfying that. We've had some conversations with them and said, well, if we went with the renovation only, the science labs are going to be below your threshold. Will you participate? Of course, they gave us the party line of, we always participate in renovations. That option's always available, but you need to make sure it meets your guidelines, your student enrollment per class guidelines, safety guidelines of the MSBA, and, you know, please submit it formally and we'll review it formally, but it's not off the table. So, you know, unfortunately, and we kind of knew this talking about it all throughout the fall, we didn't get the answer we wanted. We got the like, go ahead and submit it. You know, we will participate where it makes sense, where it satisfies the SOI. And so that's back on us. These are quotes back from them about, you know, they expect us in that preferred schematic to indicate how we've addressed these stated deficiencies for science rooms and any other existing space and how it meets that SOI. And then they'll participate in any of the renovations or ad renos. Certainly the ad renos are in safe space. You know, those are addressing those elements. The reno only are not addressing the enrollment growth, which Bob's going to talk about in a little bit. And so that is a challenge with some of those options. So I'm going to talk about cost before I turn it over to Bob to talk about the ed program and the options. And so, there's disclaimers out there that I want to put out there. This is very early in the process because yours is a renovation, ad reno, and new that are very different. Usually when you're in an MSBA capital pipeline like this, you're looking at options that are fairly the same. You guys are looking at a ladder of options, right? We start at the base repair. We went with the 10-year capital plan. We then addressed that plus the science labs and the renovation 3. Then we looked at an ad reno with a science wing. Then we looked at an ad reno with a new gym. Then we looked at an ad reno with a new middle school. And then we looked at a new construction. So you've literally taken a step on every rung of the ladder. And so I've done my best to try and interpret that in the way that I think the MSBA will. But they were not super helpful in terms of giving me guidelines and the bumper rails or guardrails that I could use in order to do that. So in full transparency, these are preliminary numbers. They're for cost comparisons only. This committee, the school building committee, still has many decisions ahead that will influence the total value of the construction cost, the total value of the project costs, regardless of the reimbursement discussion. And that includes what's in the scope of the project, where the pickup and drop is, how much asphalt we're doing outside the site, whether you hire a general contractor with a low bid or a construction manager, what finishes, materials, exterior envelope, all those decisions will influence the cost between now and August when we look to wrap that up. The MSBA didn't give us guidelines on the ineligible or eligible, which is bullet 2. But I took a safe spot in terms of the reimbursement, but a realistic one. I think I showed the ceiling appropriately on the next slide. But ultimately, bullet 3 just notes that it's up to the MSBA and that they will give us the final go around. So this number has changed since the December. I tightened up a few of the numbers. The construction dollars haven't, right? We've kind of looked at that before. We did those estimates in the fall. That stayed the same. Based on the committee request, I pulled out the modular costs. And so the renos, it now stands alone as a modular cost. With the pure renos, we have a larger amount of modulars for 4.8 million. For the ad renos, AR5 and AR6, we're using modulars, but less of them. And AR4A does rely on that demolished wing to be the final kind of phase of modulars. What was new, what I added here today was the under the new construction option, you're really losing your fields for 4 years. And so I needed to put a number to that. This is a dart at the wall. I put $2 million thinking that's all transportation costs and rental costs, for your football stadium, your softball field out back, the track, getting people to and from and whatever stuff you would need, because you would need to take those fields offline, build the new building, then demolish the old school. That's about 3 years right there, and then give it a growing season to get in there. So that's kind of where I came up with the 4 years and why I added $2 million there.
Jeff, and just one thing, can we jump in on that? And with that, the MSBA would not participate in redoing the fields, correct?
That's correct. So the stadium, the bathrooms associated with it, turf fields, those things are not eligible for reimbursement. And you'll see that kind of in this next column. So
Jeff,
sure.
before you jump on, just to put it in context, I mean, the key number is estimated construction cost and everything grows out of that.
Mm-hmm.
What have you assumed in terms of start date here and inflation rate, et cetera, et cetera?
It's a good question. Maybe Mike can pull that up while I'm thinking about what we had in the last estimate in terms of the escalation. But
yeah,
start date was 2 years. So we were assuming that it goes to town vote in fall of 25, and we take a year to design it, and we would bid it this time, the end of 26 and start of 27 would be the start of 27 would be the construction. So 2 years.
Start in 27, and we've assumed inflation up till that point. Well, I guess,
that's correct.
Inflation continues to run rampant.
It's actually down a little bit from what it was. I mean, right now we're showing it, I think it's 6.5% for the next 2 years. If Mike can fact check me on that, but I think
it was below that. Actually, it was, I've been seeing 4 to 5% projected. I'll dig into what we have factored in, but
how conservative are we? I guess that's the point.
The designer PSR estimate that we reconciled,
I think it was 6.
we reconciled back in November had 6.5% was the escalation to start date, which we that's to the start date. So it's
that's bidding in fall of 2025. So we slid from that a little bit.
Yeah,
no, it should be 26.
I know, that's what I'm saying is I'm looking at the AM Fogarty estimate from
Yeah, we're not
From
gonna bid this thing in this
November.
fall of 25. That's not
I
gonna
know,
happen.
that's my point is that the escalation numbers probably need to go up another year.
Okay.
This is Jim Duffy. I have a quick question. So we've lost the fields here now? That
No,
was something we were
so,
trying to avoid, right?
so that's only in the new construction option, which is the one at the bottom.
Ah, okay, thank you.
So, but I wanted to explain why I carried that $2 million, you know, because it didn't have modulars. You're using your existing building as the swing space, but there is swing space associated with the loss of fields and the busing costs and things like
All
that.
right, thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Okay, so all these options, you have the estimated construction cost, okay, then you got the modular, then you got the project cost markup.
Yep.
Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, absolutely. So the construction cost is what we call hard cost, and the project cost markup is what we call soft cost. And so essentially it's about 30% that goes on top of that. And what drives that is the furniture and fixtures equipment cost, the technology cost, contingencies, which make up about 10% of that because it's an ad reno. I carried a higher percentage of contingencies. So that's 7.5% for construction change orders and another 2% for total project contingencies.
Okay.
I carried a little bit of money for photovoltaic,
For what?
solar panel penalties, I'll call it, because right now you have an existing PPA. And so when we re-roof the building,
Oh, okay.
we'd have to take it offline for a certain period of time. And, you know, there's financial commitments associated with that. And if you go with the demolishing of wings, we would have to renegotiate those contracts. A little bit of money in there, a couple $100,000.
Okay.
And then the consultant costs. So the our costs as your owner's rep with the on-site representation for quality control, and then the design team, and then all the other consultants on the project, and any other permitting costs associated with it. So all that kind of rolls together
Okay.
is about 30% is the typical, and we can tighten that up. You know, by the time we get to the fall, that'll be, you know, below 30. The reason it's higher for the renos is the denominator is smaller, right? You're renovating less, but there's a lot of fixed costs with those furniture and fixtures. It's fixed costs along the way. So it ends up being 33% for the pure renos and then kind of 31 for the ad renos there. And those are some of the drivers there of why it's
Okay.
different.
Okay, just seems, it's hard for somebody that doesn't know anything, and I know something, I didn't even know it, but it's hard for somebody to wrap their head around a third when you have the word markup. I don't like the markup. You know what I mean?
I'll use the word soft cost multiplier.
It would
if
be
that's
better, because
better, but then
markup
everyone
is-
asks what's soft versus hard. So
Well, it's better than markup, because markup just looks like you don't know what you're doing and you're just figuring a third that might come in that you may not account for, but you're protecting yourself with. That's
Sure.
kind of the way I look at
Or-
it.
no, it's a
or-
good point, Alan. We can choose better vocabulary. Yeah.
Could be
If
misinterpreted.
you think about it, it's all of the
I get it.
non-construction costs.
I
It's-
do, but
doesn't-
markup.
Understood.
That's what a contractor, when they hire a GC, that's,
Yep.
20% to stand around with your hands in your pocket. Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Got it.
There is some of those hard costs that are directly marked up percentage wise,
Yep,
and that's why it's often referred to that way, is
Okay.
because, so for instance, and this may not be relevant, but if this were the private sector, oftentimes the building permit is like 1% of the, overall construction value. So that's typically why we use that term, but we're happy to change it.
okay, thank you.
So all that rolls up to the total project cost that's presented in front of you in that kind of center column. So, the renovations, kind of, again, it's a ladder, right? We've talked about each step rung you go up, you're doing more, you're getting more, but there's an associated opportunity cost with that. So it starts at the lowest rung of that, pure code upgrade of 76 million. Then with the 10-year plan is 79, 70 or 80 million. And then we start to address a little bit of science rooms. Renovation 3 is 87. And then AR5, where you're getting additional space and dealing with the science wings as well as enrollment growth, you're at 110. And then same with AR6, but you add the gym, you're at 111. And then with AR4, you're at 127. And then 165 when you do the whole new school with all the new fields associated with it. So I then ran that through the MSBA's calculator, And what I had to do was try and interpret what I think would be ineligible and where I think they would participate. And so with the new construction option, it's really straight math. It's easy, right? You know, I know what's eligible and not. And, you know, that type of a project lands in the 32 to 37% reimbursement rate. And you kind of cap out a lot of things there. With the ad renos, there's lots of components that you're not touching. So I had to kind of back those out. So we're not touching the cafeteria, and besides finishes, we're not doing anything really in the auditorium. So I kind of backed out that square footage. The district offices are always ineligible. I backed out that square footage. And some of the renovations, we're not touching the custodial space. So I kind of backed out those square footages. And so that's why in the 3 ad renos, it kind of hops around a bit, you know, from AR5A is at 32 to 37%, and AR6 35 to 42, and AR4A 35 to 44. I then show what that means in terms of dollars and millions of dollars in the estimated reimbursement column. I had figured that out first, and then I did the percentage working off of that. And then there's the total impact to the town. And so I showed the range there of what it may be after the MSBA reviews the project. And what it tells you is that the renovation R3, we're going to skip over the first two. Renovation R3, although it addresses some of the deficiencies in terms of like the roof, the windows, the boilers, the some of the science spaces, it doesn't fully meet the SOI. And so, you know, that's on shakier ground as to whether what and how much the MSBA would participate. They'd say that they would participate, but it's a lower amount because you've not addressed your enrollment growth problem. And so we kind of pegged that at 15 to 25 million or so. And so the impact of the town is at 60 to 72. The ad renos that are kind of in greater contention of AR5, 6, and 4, you're in the plus or minus 70 million range for AR5 and 6, and then plus or minus 80 for AR4A as the effective amount that the town would pay. And then obviously if you go to the new construction, that jumps up to 112 million because you are taking all those additional non-reimbursable costs. So I'll take any questions now while the numbers are there if you want, Rich, and then I'll turn it over to Bob to talk about Ed program, and then we'll come back and talk about kind of deliberation and kind of where the committee stands on the options.
Oh, I got another question.
Yeah.
The potential net cost to the town, you got the top two with no range, and all the rest of them have a range of somewhere between 8 and
Yep.
10 million range, right? Is that
Yep.
range is what is going to be presented to our residents, or are you gonna?
No, so when we get to the fall town meeting, you'll have a firm hard number
Okay.
right now because we have not submitted for their feedback. I'm giving you a range. You know, I think you're at the higher end of the range, to be honest, but
You do?
I can't commit to that for you.
You
And
say the
Ellen,
high,
Ellen, right now, the
Yeah.
way this is set up is that this is information for the committee to consider. When, like Jeff said, when we get to the point where when we pick it, or when we pick an option, they will tighten up that number to get us a more firm number. So this right now is just to give us
Okay.
information. So if we wanted to pick one of them, we'd have an idea.
Well, I know, but what I'm seeing is if you take the high of all of them, well, if you take the high of 72, 74, 71, and then you take the low of the next one, 71, well, it's obvious choice. But if you take the high, that 9 million jump, you know what I'm saying?
Well, what I would say is, I think, you know, we put the information out here for everyone to look at, and
Right.
however each person interprets it would be, you know, there's a bunch of different things, you know, does it meet the educational program when we're all done? Is there, you know, how much bang for the buck are we going to get? If we did the renovation strictly, the code renovation, we don't get much. We get
No,
paint.
no, I get
Yeah,
that.
right,
I'm
so-
just talking about the AR5, 6, and 4A, those three.
Mhm.
With the range, it's so tight, the top three, 72, 75, 72, and then you got 83 potentially. And I'm just talking like I'm a regular person. You know how it strikes me if you know, that's why I was asking why.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
part of that will get answered too when Bob does his description, because you know, why this is such a rich conversation is because every step of the ladder you get more, right? You pay more, but you get more. And so
Yeah.
it's the opportunity cost that all three of these committees here will have to bring back to the town and say, you know, we chose option X. because it had the best value, right? We looked at all these things and here was the opportunity cost of that. And that's why this is the option that we recommended to move forward with. But you will have a hard number to go to town meeting with, and we'll have a tax impact at that point with every house in terms of the median average or however you guys choose to calculate it in your town. But we'll have all that facts lined up before you get to the ballot box.
Okie dokie.
Yeah, we saw this with the Clyde Brown too. There were wild swings on it, but as we got closer and closer to town meeting vote, it got tighter and tighter till it finally ended on a number.
Yeah, and part of the reason for the range too is like
Even under that budgeted number as well, just
right. You guys haven't made all the decisions that we've talked, I mentioned earlier, right? Like what's the building clad with? Is it brick? Is it metal panel? You know, so far the committee's not pursuing really expensive geothermal and all electric systems, right? Those are really drivers, right? Other towns drive their effective reimbursement rate below 30% because they're adding all those more expensive upgrades, if you will. Right now, that hasn't been the compensation in town. You guys are being very judicious with your money. You're looking for durable products. You're looking for kind of tried and true, not cutting edge stuff. You know, that to me means you're in the upper 30%, you know, versus other towns that are really trying to be leaders in those initiatives. Now, as a side note, you know, unfortunately this week, the new administration has put a freeze on the rebate program that's out there. And so that affects lots of other towns that made a decision to go geothermal because they thought they were getting millions of dollars back, including towns that were supposed to get their check this week. That we're working on a few of them. And so unfortunately, that's been put on hold for 90 days and may never come back, judging by the way that's headed. But those committees made those decisions at that time based on knowing or believing they would get those rebates that are no longer available. So that's important information as you guys consider whether that's something you want to pursue or not.
I have a question along the lines of the items that are non-reimbursable that you kind of calculated. Is there an ability to get the impacts of those different categories and maybe a brainstorm session for how we mitigate those impacts and claw some of them back?
Yeah, so great question, Jim. And so, you know, part of it is that until we submit to the state, like I don't know exactly how they're going to interpret which ones, but there's an ability to kind of maneuver with your preferred option to some extent. So as they come back, in many cases, I'll give an example of other towns, they ask for an extra counselor's office, and you know, Chris has that counselor suite. That may be an element that's deemed to be ineligible, right? As an example, and that's happened in other towns. Some towns say, you know what, I can live without that 150 square foot office. Let's get rid of it. And other towns say, no, we need it. It's part of our core program. We're going to move ahead and just pay for that non-reimbursable square footage. You guys did that with Clyde Brown with the extended day program. You wanted that. It was part of your old modules that used to be out back. That one 1,200 square foot classroom was deemed ineligible, but that was the only element in the building that was deemed ineligible, right? Everything else they paid for. You know, there'll be an ability to dial that back once we get the feedback from the MSBA in April. So if we were to submit the end of February, the board will have their vote in April. We'll have time to kind of dial it back and kind of fine tune some of those elements before you guys finalize the scope at the end of August.
Thanks, Jeff. There was something on the news about a $22.1 billion school or education infrastructure. Is that trickling down into the MSBA at all? Do you know, or did you anyone even hear about it other than me?
I think that might have been higher ed.
Yeah, it was higher ed. Yeah,
Higher ed?
it was higher ed, Jim. They're
Right.
going to upgrade the community colleges and do some other upgrades in infrastructure and stuff like that regarding you know, the higher ed schools, not necessarily the you know, local schools.
Well, I didn't have high hopes, but thanks.
Well, Rich, I think it's important for everyone to understand. Once we had decided on a number, I think the position we've taken in the past is what we don't want to do is underestimate and have to come back to the town and say, whoops, it's too low.
Yep.
What we did with Clyde Brown, as it turns out, is we were able to come back and said, we've saved money on the project because we did some things along the way. So cost control doesn't stop with the bidding, right? there's 100, maybe there's 1,000 things along the way that impact cost, and that certainly this committee's role and responsibility to assist with the management of the project cost once it even gets underway.
Right, and for, you know, there was a lot of people here that had been part of the process before, and, you know, I would say historically, you know, the town of Millis has done a good job in trying to manage the costs where we can. I mean, they ran into some items that we were unable to do anything about, you know, hazardous waste and a few other things that came up that, you know, we had to deal with. And, you know, but other than that, you know, like Jeff said, you know, we tend to be pretty physically responsible. So. All right, Jeff, what's our next,
Let's turn it over to Bob.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay, can people see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so when we looked at it as a school administration, we looked at the various options. We really didn't look at costs. We looked at how it aligned with our educational program, our core values as a district, our strategic plan. And so, you know, we went through each iteration or option with that in mind. And just currently, Chris figured out the room capacity of each of our classrooms based on the MSBA square footage. And so this is our current facility, first floor, second floor. And every outline you see in yellow are rooms where there is at least one class, and in most cases, several classes per day that exceed the MSBA guidelines for square footage per student. And I think one of the classrooms, one of the social studies classrooms has a class of 30 in a space that's, you know, according to the MSBA guidelines, is safe for 22 students. It's not a science classroom, it's just a regular gen ed classroom. So on the first floor, there's 19 different classrooms, and right now 6 of them exceed those MSBA guidelines for capacity. And on the second floor, there's 24 classrooms, and 13 of those classrooms exceed the capacity limits or guidelines by the MSBA. So the renovation projects basically keep the same structure here. R1 is just, you know, updating our systems and getting everything up to code over a 10-year period. As Jeff mentioned, no MSBA participation. R2 is taking that 10-year series of projects and, you know, bundling them into one project. And then R3 would move some science classroom walls to create a little more space. But in doing that, they'd be taking out storage space in science classrooms for chemicals and different things in biology. So it's, you know, maybe eking out a few more seats in the classroom at the expense of storage, which we certainly need. And then R3 would also replace the bleachers in the gymnasium. So again, R1 is the 10-year capital plan. R2 is the 10-year plan rolled into one project. And R3 is a 10-year plan rolled into one project, resizing some of our science classrooms and replacing the gym bleachers. And all those options would definitely, you know, address our roof, our electric, our windows, our HVAC, but they do nothing to address those, you know, classrooms that are in yellow, and it would do nothing to support our educational plan and the vision and core values of our district. So as a school administration, you know, we couldn't consider any of the renovation options as long-term solutions for our schools. So then we looked at the addition renovation options, AR5, AR6, and AR4A. And again, AR5 adds this STEM wing kind of as an appendage at the end of the music and art wing in the high school now. And we looked at this option and what it would get us in terms of our educational program and what it didn't get us. So what AR5 got us was some of our science classrooms would be increased in size, again, just kind of cutting out walls from storage areas. It would create that multi-use STEAM wing, and that STEAM wing would have some whole group meeting space that, you know, we highlighted in our educational program. And it would, the STEAM, the classrooms and the learning areas in the STEAM wing would have appropriate storage. What AR5 wouldn't get us from our ed plan is that it would not create two distinct school areas, a middle school and a high school, and that was an important part of our educational program. We'd still have those classrooms in yellow that exceeded the MSBA capacity guidelines. It would not create collaborative space in any other area of the building except for that new STEAM wing, would still have the so-called double-loaded corridors. Our special education spaces and our English learner spaces would kind of continue as we have them now, really just finding small spaces and shoehorning classrooms or learning spaces into those areas. It wouldn't upgrade our music or UA space. We'd still have the same problems with the gymnasium. It's not large enough. We'd have no adaptive PE space. And the, it really, STEAM is, as I said earlier, almost like an appendage and, would kind of be isolated from the rest of the general ed classrooms. Some other considerations, the MSBA guidelines kind of say a school building housing odd number of students should be 150 square feet. So overcrowding still an issue. Classroom size, as I mentioned. Jeff mentioned earlier, we'd have to get some modular classrooms for swing space. The STEAM wing wouldn't be part of the general flow. Doesn't promote the middle school neighborhoods where grade level teams would have classroom student support, breakout rooms, and planning spaces all in the same area. That was an important part of our educational program. The student service areas would remain unchanged. Storage space would still be an issue. And again, we felt that this was not a long-term solution. So then we go to AR6, and AR6 is the building of the new gymnasium, and then taking the old gymnasium and creating STEAM space there. And what does that get us? Again, that project would also increase the size of some of our science classrooms. We'd get a gymnasium that is appropriate for the classes. It would also create a gymnasium that had the right sizing so that we could actually host, late round tournament games. Right now, when we have a tournament game in the, beyond the first couple rounds, we have to go to our neighbors at Medway and use their gym or some other gym. It repurposes the gym as STEAM space, so it gets some new STEAM space with appropriate storage. What it doesn't get us, once again, still commingling the middle and high school areas, not creating those two distinct school areas. Still have the undersized classrooms, still have the double-loaded corridors, still have the undersized special ed and English learner spaces, still no upgrades to music and UA, and we'd still have a need for adaptive PE spaces. The plan with the new gym does not include PE spaces. Once again, under the 150,000 square feet. Classroom sizes, swing space, I hate to call it wasted space, but the former gymnasium is 2 stories. The STEAM wing would be 1 story with a very high ceiling. Does it promote those middle school neighborhoods? The student service areas largely unchanged. Storage still a problem in most classrooms. And again, we felt that was not a long-term solution. And then we came to a conclusion that our preferred option is AR4A. And again, it's a new middle school wing, a new gymnasium, and then reconfigured and reconstituted classrooms in a high school wing. And we feel this design really met the needs of our educational program. It creates 2 distinct schools with the shared common space at the center between the 2 schools. It allows for, in the middle school, allows for the learning neighborhoods. Grade level teams would have all disciplines, special ed, and student support services in proximity. And it would allow some flexibility to promote extended learning spaces. These spaces could be adequately supervised, as you know, the middle school, an important function is to help middle school students move towards independence and autonomy. The special education and English learner spaces wouldn't be, you know, in carved out places that we, you know, have a little room. They'd be thoughtfully embedded into the learning neighborhoods. The spaces would support creativity and provide quiet spaces for social emotional learning. That's SEL, you know, different areas where kids can, you know, deal with and handle the issues that come up during the school day invariably. And the flexible multi-purpose gathering spaces that could be used for whole grade meetings, presentations, adaptive PE, and some of the activities, group activities they do at the middle school level. At the high school level, we felt AR4A addressed the educational plan. Again, the flexible learning, which we certainly don't have right now, but the ability to merge classrooms or create open spaces. At the high school level, the classrooms could be situated to organize in areas of departments, so collaborate and share materials department-wide. The new gym would meet MIAA standards for late round tournament games and also address overcrowding in our phys ed classrooms, small group learning spaces adjacent to classroom areas. You know, for the EL and special ed kids as well. The classroom layout support interdisciplinary learning and collaboration. You know, we see it at the Clyde Brown School now. You know, it's not hallways, it's common areas between you know, in the middle of opposite sides of the classroom wings, and they become real learning spaces. So rather than having kids sit on the tile floor with their backs against lockers, they'd have space to work collaboratively with tables and chairs and furniture that is conducive to that. The phasing, we wouldn't need modular classrooms, as Jeff and Chris explained, and we'd have enough storage and for student work and projects. So, you know, in looking at our educational plan and looking at the various designs, it became apparent to us that AR4A was the only option aside from a new facility that would meet the current and future needs of our middle and high schools. It addresses overcrowding issues, which the other AR addition renovation options do not. And it creates a facility that supports 21st century learning and is really, creates the type of learning environment that the kids in Millis really deserve and they're going to need as we slide into the second quarter of the 21st century. So those were our thoughts on it, and if anyone has questions.
Bob, I have one quick question.
Sure.
It's been mentioned many times about separating the middle school from the high school, right?
Yes.
Is
Yep.
that a safety issue?
Well, no, I wouldn't say it's a developmental issue. A middle school and a high school have two different philosophies. And this would support that. It's not like we don't have a problem right now with, high school kids shaking down middle school kids
Okay.
in the hallways or anything. None of
It's
that.
too bad, because that'd be a great message to get out there.
Yeah, it's not. It's really not. But there are opportunities for unsupervised interactions right now, like on the bathrooms on the second floor. We haven't had, major problems, but
Yeah, okay.
from time to time things come up. But it's also, just developmentally to have spaces that look at where the middle school is able to do work holistically and the social emotional growth of the kids, and the high school philosophy more academic focused. That's the two different philosophies. And so
the
that's
way
the main reason why
Okay,
we,
but the way it is now, is there a classroom of a middle school, like right next to a classroom of a high school, so that their lockers are near each other, or they just pass each other in the hall?
yeah, there are some, like on the second floor, we have some high school classrooms towards the end of the second floor by the back parking lot. There are high school classes next to middle school classes. And
Okay, but the locker rooms the lockers are separate, and I'm assuming the bathrooms are not separate?
on the second floor, the bathroom in the 8th grade wing, high school students will use that.
Okay,
They have a class on the second floor. The
Okay.
lockers are separate, and frankly, kids in high school, they can choose to have a locker if they want. Most kids don't even have lockers because they carry everything now on their backs.
okay. And they don't eat together?
No, they do not.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And Ellen, I would also say being close is also a good thing, because there's a lot of times when it's appropriate that the high school kids, work with the middle school kids, and, in appropriately supervised situations, we certainly want to promote that. And we think that's a great advantage. And it's the same thing with having Clyde Brown right across the driveway. We had on Friday, our varsity basketball team on Friday morning welcome the the elementary school kids as they came in the building. The kids loved it. It's great for the high school kids to be role models, and it's great for the younger kids to see them and see what's possible for them. So we certainly look forward to those opportunities, but we don't like having, a kid leaving his Spanish class to go to the bathroom, and there's a 7th or an 8th grader in there.
Right, okay.
All right, Jeff, what is our next task?
I'm gonna turn it over to Mike. He's gonna walk us through the evaluation process that the committee has done to date, and then we'll open it up for questions.
So this is mostly a recap. If you all aren't too traumatized by the process, we'll go through it one more time just so you're aware of what's been discussed in the past. But if you remember, we put together an evaluation matrix as a way of at least starting to have some discussion about certain things, certain criteria, and how they affect each of the options. And these were the 12 options that we utilized to back check those designs against. And then Jeff, you go to the next slide. So each of those were listed along the left-hand side of this column. And then this was just the sample. Jeff, do we have the actual one?
Yeah, there you go.
No. Sorry, that might be easier to remember as it was slightly tweaked. So the criteria were listed along the left-hand side, and all of the options that we evaluated were listed along the top, ranging from the far left column of just the existing renovation of and code upgrade of the existing building, what often is referred to as the base option in the MSBA program. And then we evaluated the 2 renovation options, R2 and R3, which did some renovation, but didn't really gain anything programmatically. And then we evaluated the 3 addition renovation options, which varied in size of the addition and the program also. And then the last one, of course, being the new build. And obviously, you know, as we looked at this as a group, and sort of weighed things from a least advantageous to less advantageous to neutral to advantageous and most advantageous, we had sort of a 5 layer red to green approach. The ones with the most dark green obviously were the most advantageous. Obviously, the new build satisfies a lot of those problems better than the other options, but obviously what it's the worst at is solving the problem about keeping costs under control and reasonable for the town. So that's why you see a lot of extremes on the new build, from the dark green to the dark red. And then switching gears to the other side of the chart where it was the renovation options, that you see a lot of red, which really wasn't solving some problems regarding the educational program. It's obviously those were more disruptive to the ongoing education, and the also had the biggest issues revolving around swing space and the need to bring in modulars, et cetera, which helped to drive up cost. And then, you know, there were some things that are neutral. Obviously, on those, there's less change to the site work. So parking and circulation are neutral, and permitting and approvals is relatively neutral, since we're not doing sort of some major site work around those projects. And then the addition renovation, the 3 in the middle, sort of balanced out a little bit better. They seem to be balanced more amongst certain areas where they can obviously accommodate the program a little bit better. On the smaller renovations, that was a sort of the lighter green, but AR4A most notably was the only one that really addressed some of the major programmatic and ed plan challenges that Bob referenced just a little while ago. And so you can see that AR4A kind of had more of the green tones. There's still some things that were consistent across the AR, like the swing space and parking and circulation, where it might not be the worst of the options, but there were some concerns that made them more challenging. And also, you know, there's a slightly more impact on things like the cost, right? Obviously 4A is a little more costly than 5 and 6, so it's that was orange instead of the yellow. Anyway, feel free to jump in if you all had questions about this, but this was sort of what we use as just a tool. It's not meant to be quantitative, it's meant to be qualitative. But what it also should help you do is sort of see the benefits, the pros and cons of each of the options. And you can sort of see that, obviously in an ideal world, if costs were no option, the new build would solve most problems more effectively. However, we don't live in that world. So looking at the AR options, the AR4A option seemed to rise to the top mostly because of the programmatic solutions, while still maintaining a more cost-effective utilization of funds. Any thoughts on that before we move to the next slide? Any comments? No?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got one comment. So
Go ahead, John.
the swing space portion in
Yep.
in 4A,
Yep.
it's listed as, less advantageous. I thought, given the presentation tonight, it would be a little bit more advantageous because we're going to be using a portion of the building that will decant into a renovation and then a demolish of the old space, which I think would put that ahead of the other ARs a little bit, maybe, because we'll
Yeah.
have no need for modules in that case.
Yeah, I'd have to go look back at the sort of recording and see what the dialogue was around that. But I know there was a reason. I'm just not recalling it off the top of my head. But to your point, yes, like there's less of a need for modulars, but because there still is a need for swing space, and granted, you're building it, so you're mitigating costs a little bit. You're also, because it becomes a 3-phase project, you can't just build the addition, move people in, and then demo the other wing, right? So we need to keep that other wing for swing space while we do the renovation, because we don't have enough space, without it before we demo it. So then
Mike,
that
I
becomes
think-
a third
I think the other
phase.
thing was on that is we had actually anticipated maybe needing some swing space in that earlier, because we did this grid, a little earlier on in the process. So I think that's maybe why we had kept that spot in there. But when you go back and check that, that could be why.
Yeah, I mean, to John's point, it grades out a little better than the other two ad renos. Like, I mean,
Yeah. Right.
it's a relative exercise. It could
Right.
certainly flip to yellow and be kind of more neutral, because you're not paying for the throwaway cost of the modulars. But to Mike's point, it was, I think, the 3-phase nature of kind of how we kind of moved clockwork around the building is
Yeah.
why we're thinking that was kind of less advantageous. And again, that's kind of the relativeness also compares against the new option, which is like, hey, build a new building and then there's no swing space. But there is some middle ground there that we could tick that up if the committee feels that's a good differentiator.
But that's a good point, John. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Any other questions, comments on the matrix? Okay. Next slide, Jeff. You may remember this, though it's gotten a little bit longer over the course of the project as we've taken some steps and paused or slowed down, I should say, not paused, but as we worked through an elongated PSR schedule. This was the last go around from December, where we showed the moving out of the PSR submission to the end of February, which means board approval ideally in April. And there's also the FAS meeting in March that's in between those two. So this shows that extended PSR process, as well as the community forums that we've had to date, which are the stars along the bottom. And when we've proposed some potential ones, we can talk about, what happens after we submit this to PSR and we start schematic design portion. We'll plan out a communication, public communication timeline similar to this, to where we start planning out other community forums, and then, road shows as we get closer to the vote and the funding approval in the fall, so that, if all goes according to what I think what we're hoping, then hopefully there's an approval by the town in November, and then jumping right into the next phase, which would be design development, construction documents, and ultimately bidding and construction. Do people understand all that? I don't know if there's any other questions before.
I think we.
The FAS meeting that Mike alluded to, which is like if the project will get submitted in February, and then the MSBA has a subcommittee,
Right.
the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee, and they look at the ed program. They challenge Bob to justify why you guys are asking for the things you do, how it works today, how it will work tomorrow. There'll be feedback that comes out of that then Bob will then tweak, and we'll refine the program between now and the end of August when you kind of finalize it. So it's an ongoing cycle.
Yeah.
They don't just accept what you guys put in. They kick the tires on it. They push back, and then this committee, the building committee will have to deal with the feedback and adjust accordingly. The last slide is just the road ahead. Mike will cover it, and then we'll open it up for Q&A.
So we wanted just to talk through where we go from here. Obviously the on the agenda tonight is for the SBC to vote on a recommended preferred option. That needs to be followed by supporting votes from the school committee and the select board, which we've tentatively put down for February 5th. And then at the end of February, the team here, mostly Chris, but with supplement from Vertex, will submit the preferred option to the MSBA by the 27th. And then that's for the April 30th board meeting, where ultimately the MSBA board votes to approve proceeding to schematic design. And then March through July, we'll work with Chris and his team to develop the design, to start to refine the design into a schematic level from its conceptual level right now, followed by June to August, starting up community forums and other board presentations for other constituencies around town. Obviously that'll bleed into the fall when people are back from the summer. And then the MSBA will vote what's called a project scope and budget agreement. That's where it's basically agreed upon what the scope of the project is and what
the final reimbursement value will be.
Thank you.
We'll know that by like the meeting before that, which happens kind of early October, but that's where it's formalized. That's when the deal happens at the end of October.
And one thing, Jeff, which Mike was bringing up, so in part of the developing the preferred option, the building committee would be involved with that process to, like you said, make
of course
choices in there. It's not it's TEPE in conjunction with the town.
Correct. And most especially with the educational staff, and the faculty. A lot of it will be, design related as we start to, really tweak out what spaces are adjacent to which spaces, what do those spaces begin to look like, what's in them. Those types of things start to occur during the schematic design level. And then, the addition portion, what does that begin to look like architecturally? Where are doors, windows, what are the materials? Those are some of the things that begin to take shape, as well as if the site work related to like an AR4A, what does that look like? We start to have conversations about those traffic flows that were mentioned before, about middle school and high school traffic flows, et cetera. All those conversations start through the schematic process. They're not all resolved during the schematic process, but the option is developed to enough of a level to get a better idea of cost as well. The other key deliverable during schematics will be a schematic level cost estimate. So there's a bit of a more refinement, as was mentioned before about Clyde Brown. As you get further and further along and the funnel starts to get smaller, and you start to get further and further refinement around the numbers and what things cost. So that'll all be part of the schematic process.
All right, well, good. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
ahead.
Saw that the February 5th was to have the board's vote and to endorse it. And I was wondering if we had to be together to do that. Like, we have a school committee meeting February 4th, the day before. So I was wondering if we could just vote on what we endorse then and then just like let you know, or do we all have to be together to do that?
No, you can do it on your convenience. I mean, I didn't know you guys were gonna have a full quorum tonight, so it was just to make the presentation we made tonight. So
Yeah.
no, we don't need to have a meeting on the 5th. If your board wants to vote for it at your next meeting, or if either board wanted to vote for it tonight after the school building committee votes, like any of those options would work. We just need to collect the endorsements between now and the end of February, when we would actually package everything up and send it into the state.
So you do have the opportunity, if the school has made the decision or is able to make the decision, to do it as soon as tonight, or like you said, at the
Or
floor.
at their fourth meeting, yeah, whatever is most convenient.
Okay. We didn't like post a meeting for tonight, so I don't know if we should do that tonight because like
Yeah,
it's not
Yeah,
an
you
official
probably
meeting and
shouldn't.
we're not like voting members right now, just
Yeah.
Denise and Mark are. So I think that we should do it at our next meeting. I
correct.
just
Yeah,
was
you
trying
should-
to
you
like
should-
streamline it so that we didn't have to have like
Yeah.
so many meetings.
Yeah, no,
You
there's
should
nothing magic
definitely
about it. Like,
have it posted no matter what, if you don't have it posted, because it's a formalized vote. And
Right.
so, you know, that's an important step, is to make sure that the public's aware that you are voting on that.
Yeah. So we can put it on our February 4th agenda then and definitely do that and send that along to you guys.
okay, great, thanks.
Well, but I gotta ask something about that. Now, hold on, because we were gonna have a joint meeting, whether it was gonna be Zoom or live. And now it looks like we're not, right, Robin?
Well, I was just asking if we needed to have it.
Wait. We will still have a meeting. They can vote on it ahead of time. The decision would be the select
Right.
board could have their meeting, Craig and Ellen. Could they vote on theirs separately, and then we could.
So if I may,
Go ahead.
through the chair. So I put out the date of February 5th, right? Just because I wanted the three boards to, to hear the feedback. You're all hearing it tonight. We don't need to have another meeting. There's nothing that requires us from having a meeting as a group together. Nothing in the process requires that. It's just the best practices so that the other two committees can hear the deliberation of the school building committee and understand kind of why they arrived at their recommendation. You can easily go back to your respective jurisdictions, right? And you've heard the presentation, you've heard the feedback tonight, and then make your votes at your own meetings. You don't have to do it as a joint meeting.
No,
That's
I
entirely
get
your
that.
decision.
I get
The benefit of the joint meeting is when, the other boards, committees outside of the SBC may not have heard, some of the reasoning, some of the presentation, but given that you all have this evening,
And you've been at multiple meetings through the fall. at least the
you've been
select board
multiple
has.
meetings, that's
get
not maybe
Okay.
necessary, but that's up to you to
Okay,
decide.
I appreciate that, but at our meeting, if the select board is gonna have a meeting where we are going to vote, we are not going to make a presentation to the people that are zooming into our meeting. We would need somebody to come and make that presentation so that we can, so that our audience can understand, right, Craig?
Yeah, my thought is, I mean, this is asking for a large amount of money. I support the idea of the one meeting with both boards. I think it sends a message. I don't want to put it on the back of the school committee agenda the day before. I think, and you don't have a full group here. I think you got 3. I don't know if you have 4, but we're missing 1. So I really think it's got to be the school building committee presenting to the select board, and I would really hope it would be the school committee at that time too. Then each group takes a vote. We're not going to get too many chances to vote on something that costs between 70 something and 80 something million dollars, and I think it deserves a meeting unto itself with both committees, and we've got it scheduled and booked. I mean, it went out a few weeks ago on the schedule. So
And
I
you know,
hope-
if people's questions have been answered already, it should be a relatively quick meeting. as all we're doing is sort of regurgitating. Now, if there are people that maybe haven't been a part of the discussion
Yeah,
recently.
like everybody.
Yeah, I think that it needs, I don't think it will be a quick meeting. I think it's going to be very much a regurgitation of this meeting. And I don't mind. I've been at every meeting that got us up to this, well, not every, but a lot of the meetings that got us up to this point, and they were all time well spent. So I think
Yeah.
it's,
I think, Greg, it'll be a little different. It's going to be a little different because we're going to come to you with one proposal,
Correct.
not the
Right.
menu. So we get through A's and R's and all that kind of stuff, and we come down to summary of the ed plan, and this is the recommendation of the school building committee, and we're asking for your support.
yep, that's exactly right. That's the way I would envision it happening. And you know, clearly explaining why whatever decision you arrive at tonight is the best decision, or you believe it's the best decision.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Bob Mulaney's explanation was very, very good, but the public deserves this at a posted meeting so that they can come and ask questions, because I'm not sneaking a vote in
Yeah.
and looking like that. I'm not doing it.
And
Well,
this,
so I just.
and on the select board side, we allow comments during our process, not interrupting you during it, but when we get to the point where it's
Right.
time to vote, we often allow conversation and questions at that point.
So Bob's presented this at our meeting before, so this information isn't new to the people that watch our school committee meetings. If one or two of them watch, fantastic. So I guess I was under the impression that we were here to learn about this, and then we were going to have that February 5th meeting to endorse whatever is decided here by the committee. I didn't understand that the February 5th meeting was to do this all over again.
It's really not to do it over again. We'll hear the presentations again, but again, Robin, that's not for us. I mean, I've heard this presentation,
Yeah.
I'm going to say 4 or 5 times now, and I have a strong inclination where we're headed. But and I'm not a voting member, but I think there's other people that will spend the time tuning into a select board in a school committee meeting. And aside from a couple people here tonight, it's not a large group. So I don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a good use of our time.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just thought that the February 5th meeting was to endorse whatever happened here tonight. So I just wanted some clarification on what that was that we were doing February 5th.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, I think that cleared that up. Thank you.
Rich,
So go ahead.
could I just ask a question about the endpoint? I want to make sure that we're all working with the same calendar. I think we had a date, final vote or whatever it is, or signing ceremony, whatever it was, October 29th with MSBA. Is that when it's finally said and done? And then we present that outcome to the voters? Is that the way this works?
That's the way it works, yeah. So you'd go to, I forget whether you guys have a regular town meeting or a special in the fall.
We have a regular town meeting in the fall, early in November. Select board
They do
sometimes
2
moves
every
it.
year. Yeah.
So we'd either hit that or do a special within that, or however you guys would choose to do it when that time comes, you know, and that we would know the number before the 29th, but the formal gaveling through would be on the 29th of October, and then you'd have the deal, you know, inked.
Because the town meeting, which is usually I think it's the first Monday of November. I don't remember exactly, but the board can move that. You know, you have to work back from when you
Yeah,
have to
so
provide the information to the voters.
Right, so by the end of August, we'll have the final number, right?
Okay.
The school building committee, all these committees will meet again in August. And there's a hard deadline there by the end of the summer, and I know that's challenging, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there in August. But essentially the same thing will happen. The final recommendation will come from the school building committee. We'll look for 2 more endorsement votes. That will be the final number you're going to bring to the taxpayers. I'll give you a much tighter estimate of the reimbursement. By the end of September, I'll have the feedback back. I'll dial it in. I'll know the number. It won't be official to the end of October, but by the end of September, we'll know what we're getting back. And that just, it comes with how you print it at that point, you know, whether it's a range or an actual number.
Right. But I mean, again, as you understand, we're working back from the notification requirements for town meeting. And then the second point for everybody to understand is there is no election in November. If we're going to do this in November with the voters, it's going to have to be a special election. Not that it's a bad idea, but the next regular election is not until May
Right.
of
So
26.
we would probably do a special is my thought. We'll talk about that at our meeting.
That's up to the select board, but just so everybody understands the calendar here and how this is going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, typically the election occurs, within a couple of weeks of the town meeting vote. But, you have some
think it's not
flexibility in
planned.
how you
It
plan
has
that.
to be within 120 days, I think, of the town meeting. Like they can't.
That's
be-
the maximum, yeah. But some towns have even done it before town meeting, which we don't recommend, but you do have some flexibility in how you plan that election out. But because it's a dead override and you have to get the 2/3 of town meeting and the 50% plus one at the polls.
This part
Yeah.
we're quite familiar with, yes.
And I'm certain that we will have some special election after this, shortly after town meeting on it. We just haven't said that yet, gotten that far yet as a committee, but it just makes sense. I mean, I'm not talking out of turn. We haven't reached a decision on that, but it would make sense to do it shortly after the town meeting vote.
All right, good. All right, Jeff, what do you guys, I think that pretty much wrapped up your presentation, correct?
That covers our agenda.
All right, so in the group, SBC group, was there any discussion regarding the options and or what's the feeling of the group right now? So I'll start off with Jim because he's up on the top of my screen.
Well, I think that from my point of view, we have done hard work to show earlier the need that the building just needs to be fixed. I mean, it's just no doubt about it. The explanation of the ed plan really, assuming we accept that as the right ed plan, and the school stands behind it 1,000%, then I think the recommendation of the AR4A or whatever it is the right solution. It's expensive. All of this is going to be expensive, but it meets the goals. And I think from my point of view, I would support that proposal.
And Diane, you're next to Jim in my book there.
Life is good, isn't it? I agree with what Jim said. Having spent months, maybe years, working on this, trying to winnow it down to what works best for the schools and what we think works best, I think it's AR4A.
All right, John?
Yeah, so listening to Bob, I'm no expert in education. He is. And with his recommendation, I support the AR4A.
All right, and we'll end up having to have a formal vote on this. This is just getting everyone's thoughts. Mark, I see you there. Are you able to chime in?
Yeah. Yep. No, I think through the whole process and, 4A kind of stood out at the beginning. And then as we went back and kind of started all the other options over again, this kind of popped back up as really the most viable for the town. So I support 4A.
Denise?
I also support AR4A. I think that there was a lot of thought put into not just the initial options, but also taking a large amount of additional time, and thanks to TAPE and Vertex, to look at other options, because we are so focused on being fiscally responsible that even more options, as just stated, we literally stopped at every rung on the ladder. And so even looking at additional options, AR4A still rose to the top. It was the choice by the public at the initial forum when there was feedback. AR4A came out on top. I still support it even after going through all of the different multiple machinations of financial options.
Great, thank you. Bob? Bob, what are your thoughts?
I mean, obviously,
You have no thought because you've already presented it, but
yeah, I mean, certainly for and I'm not a voting member, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, no, but certainly, we as an administration, looked at all the options, and thank you to everyone for all your work in vetting those options and, going back to the drawing board over the summer. But certainly for me and for us as a school administration, AR4A met the educational program that we worked so hard on to develop as part of the MSBA process.
All right, great. And the only other one is Craig, because like you said, you've sat through all these meetings. What's your feedback on that?
Well, Ellen also, she's been as just about as many, but my thought is, I buy into the ed plan that Bob talked about. I like that we went through every rung on the ladder, as I think Denise said. It's easy enough to justify that this is the right choice. The incredibly expensive, but not quite as expensive choices don't meet our needs. And we looked at those pretty hard. So I support the 4A. I think that's the right one.
All right. And my thought is that, I agree with what everyone said. We did a really deep dive. We looked at everything. And the way I feel it is that we're providing a value for the town. It's not necessarily the cheapest, but we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. So I feel that, that would be my option also. So with that being said, I bring forward a motion that we approve the 4A renovation project to bring forwards to the select board.
As the recommended preferred option.
As the recommended preferred option.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded, and I'm gonna have everyone vote separately. So Jim?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Sorry, and let's see, Mark?
Yes.
Denise?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, so that's unanimously.
And John, did we hear John?
John McDonough, sorry, John.
I'm a yes.
Okay, great. All right, so with that being said, the school building committee has put forwards the 4A option as the preferred option to go to the select board, which we will present on the 5th with a full presentation once again for to walk through, what happened, how we got there, and all the information that we had behind it to be voted on by the select board.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. As part of the PSR, I think we have another meeting with the building committee, and assuming the other committees affirm the vote you just took, part of the PSR is we need to submit actually 3 official options to end PSR. That's the renovation only option, the ad reno, which you just did that work, and then just confirm that the new option that we would bring forward for PSR, although that's not your preferred schematic, but it is one of the 3 brought forward to the end, is in one. And I think we just will have to have that officially by the time we submit PSR. So that's the only kind of clerical thing, just to confirm, I guess. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, Chris, were you thinking? I was thinking that we would leave AR5 and AR6 as part of the record essentially, and not necessarily drop them out. But I was figuring we would whittle the 3 renos down to 1 reno. That's kind of what I was thinking it would land.
Yeah, I think we can talk more about how we present that. I think we just need the official representative of the 3 options, at least 1 each, and I think we've got that. I just want to make sure the new option that we're presenting is in 1, right?
It's the only one that we've carried along since the PDP.
Yeah.
So I assumed that. I just didn't want to unfairly document something.
Do we need to vote on that?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just telling you that's how we'll write the PSR, and we'll get you'll get another estimate for N1, because that's how we have to do it for the MSBA to show the representative scale and which we already have, right? We already have these estimates.
I was gonna say the estimates we already have, don't we, Chris?
So
last
we
round.
got to
that's
tweak
what
them
Jeff
for-
just showed.
yeah.
Jeff showed the table, but at the end of the day, we just have to, there's just this clerical thing, and I just wanted to make sure it's clear that we, according to this vote just now, we would document that the preferred option is AR4A, assuming the other committees do that work as well. And then we'll show the scale just like Jeff showed just a minute ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the only reason we carried N1, you know, through PDP after PDP was because it's required. Just the fact that, you know, this committee had decided really not to pursue that. But per what you're saying, it's required for the submission. But I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be N1, considering that's the one that we took through the evaluation process. It's the one we did the criteria matrix with, like all of our data backs that up. So I would just stick with that.
Yeah, just saying the committee knows why it's there and they know why we have to talk about it. And that's all. But that's all I need.
Yep.
And one last thing on the N1, Mike, is that, you know, we just wanted to make sure that people understand that the reasoning behind why we didn't go for N1 was the ancillary problems. So meaning that the loss of the fields that we would not be reimbursed for, the disruption for the, you know, the whole school area and doing that. It wasn't just that the price of the new school was too high. It was the total price of the new school would have been too high. That would have been the problem. So it wasn't like we discounted it from the beginning. We made a conscious decision that, you know, as much as it would be nice, there were too many things that were going to cost too much money, you know, that didn't really relate to the school. So. All right. With that being said,
Can I just ask another question? I'm sorry. I have another question about this February 5th meeting. You keep saying that you are going to the select board to present this. So I just want to clarify what this February 5th meeting is. Is it like a joint board meeting between the school building board and the school committee and the select board? Or are we all going to the select people's meeting and you're presenting it to them and we're just there? Like, I just am confused about what's happening on the 5th here and what you're looking for and what you need from all the boards to move forward.
I was under the impression it was a meeting of the select board and a meeting of the school committee. So 2 posted meetings that night with us, with all of us who are going to have to recommend on it, listening to what's just been said, acting shocked and surprised when we hear the pick, so as not to ruin the surprise for everybody else. But then we endorse it. We vote to endorse or not endorse, and then we sign whatever paperwork needs to be signed. So I think they keep using the shorthand of select board meeting, but I believe it's really the select board school committee meeting.
Yeah, the intent is to have both boards have a quorum and have an actual meeting. It's a presentation with a streamlined version of what we did today. You know, I won't get into all the nuances or details, but we'll explain the history, how we kind of progressed and how the recommendation came about and why.
Sure. And then
so ideally that's presented by, you know, obviously the team here with Vertex and TAPE. And typically, I don't know if Rich is up for it, but typically the chair or a member of the SBC is the one representing them, you know, or you could do, some towns have done, you know, a meeting of all 3, and then you have the entire SBC there as well, or a quorum of the SBC. I don't think that's necessary. The SBC has made its positions, you know, clear. So it's really a question of someone representing the SBC to be there as the representative and say, this is the option that we chose. And obviously most of the questions we can answer if there are any, and Chris can answer, and Bob should probably be there as well to answer any of the educational questions.
So are we also expecting like the public to come and listen to this and ask questions? Is this like because you had made a comment, Craig, that like people can ask questions during a select board meeting. Like, is that what we're doing here? We're having this meeting for the townsfolk to understand what it is we're choosing and people to come and ask us questions about how we got to this point?
I believe there'll be future meetings where we go into a lot more detail about it. But I certainly think that anybody who does show up at the meeting should be allowed to ask pertinent questions.
Sure, I just wasn't understanding like the marketing for this meeting. Are we trying to get people to come to this? Is this just to like
No.
check a box so that we can move forward and then get to those questioning points?
Combination of the two. I mean, we want to make this as transparent as possible. There will be a small group that I'm sure will attend. There might be a larger group that attends, but there'll be many future meetings where there'll be better forums when we get more prices, more final, more detail, where this will be presented again and again and again. It's going to be an ongoing marketing stuff, but anybody who would like, not marketing, but communication plan to see how we got here. But I think this is a first step, and I know we'll get a few people that attend. This isn't if I have to pick one meeting to go to about the school, this would not be the one I went to.
The real audience is the select board and the school committee. Now, obviously, they're all public meetings. You can, as the chairs of those committees can choose to allow for, public questions and things like that. But the real audience, the intended point of the presentation is for the select board and the school committee, as opposed to some of the community forums where obviously the real intended audience is the public. So in other words, it's not trying to keep anybody away, but the real intent of the meeting is to solidify support behind the selected option.
So Craig, are your meetings typically in person at town hall?
We do.
Yes.
And we can do a Zoom alternative for people, but we can if we kick Mike and Karen out, we can get 8 people around the table up front. I know the finance committee gets 9, so we could get both committees up front for the presentation.
So just to clarify, from my perspective, originally we talked about this as an SBC meeting as well, and we typically do our meetings via Zoom. So am I hearing this correctly, Craig, that the select board will take over organizing this the way you guys normally do your meetings for February 5th, and the school building committee will send a representative or 2 or however many?
I'm going to suggest you work with Ellen to get the details hammered out, but that can be hammered out with, the chair after the meeting, or right now if you want.
No,
we can do it later.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do that. We'll do that a little later, I think.
Sorry, is this 7 or 7:30?
7. We made it 7. Listen, I know this seems to be difficult to grasp, but this is the first step in introducing what's going to be a long, hot summer. And so we need to be as transparent and as friendly and as positive as we can be. So I suggest that the school committee comes, the SBC, as many comes, and we put on a great kumbaya party and hopefully extend it through the summer into the fall. I mean, this is it, people. It's not that hard. So we have a meeting, we present as a united front, and we continue it as long and as it takes. We get it?
That's been my view of it, but yeah.
Okay.
Well, you guys have to deliberate on this. I mean, you decide. We
I
just
know.
recommend and you decide.
At some point, we'll cut off discussion and we'll
You'll
each
decide.
huddle in their little corner and deliberate, and then come back and give our answers. I don't know how you do it when you got 2 committees, but we can deliberate.
Well, you don't have to deliberate together, even
Right.
vote separately.
Right. If you put on the presentation that I mean, not obviously is in much detail, but as well as you did tonight, we'll handle the rest.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why we wanted to have the meeting. So we're all on the same page. So,
Perfect.
great. All right. Sounds like a plan. All right. With that being said, we have bills to pay. That would be our next item.
And don't want to, just a quick reminder that because we didn't have a quorum last month, I think it was done via writing, but I'm not sure if we want.
I need a vote
Yeah,
on 2
they're
bills.
both in there. So we can let the other 2 committees go though, Rich, if you're going to just
Yeah.
do this business.
I'm going to disappear then. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I'll-
Thank you, guys.
Thank
see you
you.
on
I'm
the
gonna
5th.
close the school committee meeting out.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
Rich, are you doing another meeting after this, or are you going to bed?
We
You
were
guys
gonna
are-
just do a quick, I would like to go to bed because I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but, we're gonna do a quick, SBC after this, but it'll be abbreviated, Ellen, because
Okay,
I'm getting tired.
okay, good.
That's why we start our meetings at 7, okay?
He's cranky no matter what the hour. Come on.
Goodbye.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, we have a bill to pay.
So
The
this
first one,
this is the November bill,
Yeah.
which I did confirm was paid on January 2nd. So,
Right,
but
we just-
we do need to vote verbally.
Yep, okay, so I make a motion that we approve the bill for professional services for the month of November for Vertex for the amount of $13,222 and no cents.
Second,
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
aye.
All right, passed unanimously. Next,
But
invoice.
it's, December
Yeah,
for
would be-
Vertex.
would be I make a motion to approve the invoice for Vertex for the month of December for the amount of $9,040.50.
Second,
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passed unanimously. So,
And then we also have 2 minutes from November 13th and December 11th.
okay, we'll do them separately. And December 7th. I make a motion that we approve the meeting notes for November 13th as written.
Second,
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
aye.
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 All right, next one would be the December 7th, was that? Kim?
December 11th.
You didn't have a
11th, sorry.
quorum, right?
We did not.
So there's no
And,
minutes,
There were minutes, there were no motions. I just took notes from the meeting.
but there's no minutes to approve. There was no meeting, no open meeting was held, so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, good. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that. All right, so we won't vote on those. That makes that easier. All right, that being said, I make a motion to adjourn the school building committee.
Second,
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
aye.
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 All right.
Bye-bye.
So, good night, everybody. Now we will have a.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, thanks, Bob. Good
Bob.
night, guys. We are just gonna have a short, permanent building committee, so, once everybody steps off, I think we're good. Oh,
You,
Chris is-
you don't need us, right, Rich?
Nope.
See you
All
guys.
right. Yep, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Well, congrats on your vote and another step down.
Up,
Take care, all.
step up.
Step up.
Yeah. Or I meant to say another box checked, I think. But, all right, take care.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.
All right, so, you guys get sent out. We looked at,
Do we need to call the meeting to order?
oh, I make a motion that we, call the permanent building committee to order.
Second,
All right, motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Okay, so we had sent out some information on the scope for the reshingling and repair work to the roof fascias and gutters and downspouts and the masonry repairs. So we sent that out for you guys to take a look at. We went out actually to the building and met with the roofer that had already looked at it, who had some good suggestions. So I think we're getting to the point where we've got at least a scope set that we could send out to bid. A couple tweaks that we want to maybe make to it where on some of the overhangs, initially we had thought maybe we would cover them, and now looking at them a little closer, we could maybe leave them and just clean and paint them. But there are some areas that need some repair work on it, which we're gonna have to take a look at this weekend and see where, if we want to try to tune that back a little bit. But the thought process is that we would do the masonry repair work. We would bid the masonry repair work out as a package, both the upper and the lower. we do the upper work at the beginning. So we'd go ahead and fix the turret. Then we would do the fascias and the roof. So that we would make the top of the building watertight. We check and see where we were in funding, because that way we'd have money retained. We'd have the bid for the second part of the masonry repairs down the lower section. So we did get that number at once, and then we could proceed on getting that done. And then if, depending on what we have left for money, we could take a look at the siding, because the siding is getting is basically falling off on a portion of the building. So we're trying to retain the money that we have and spend it in phases. So we, you know, we do the stuff that we have to up at the top. We can work our way down to the bottom. We're gonna end up putting some security lights in. That's gonna happen no matter what, to light up the building to keep the kids from hanging out there.
Can we get rid of that fire escape?
Well,
No.
we looked at that. It doesn't really make sense to get rid of it. I know they climb up on it. If we get rid of it, we limit, you know, what we can do on that. I know technically, according to the architects, you know, the report that we got, we don't need the fire escape. Right now we have it. If we take it down, we have to A, pay to take it down, and then B, we have to take to put it up. So until we really figure out what's going to happen with it, you know, I would say, and this is just as my thought, is that, you know, we would leave it. You know, why take it down and then have someone who wants to move in there and then we have to put it back up again?
Well, can we mark it or something? Because it's just sitting there. It's like a, what do they call it? Nuisance.
No, it's not a public nuisance. We can clean it up though,
Why is it not a public nuisance? It's just sitting there waiting for somebody to do something with it.
because
Just
it's
jump
not
on.
it's not an attractive nuisance is what they would call it. It's just not. It's been there for how many years? 30?
What are you gonna pull a lawyer on
many?
me here? You gonna pull a lawyer on me now?
I think part
No.
of it is, I think if we light it, if we light it, B, the other thing is if we rent it. I mean, that's the whole
Oh,
goal.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I think if we get to the point where we rent it and we know what we're doing with it, then we can take it down. But the other thing is if we have a
We
business.
can
and
always
people-
take it down.
Yeah.
Anytime. We can always take it down, but let's
Before
not,
somebody gets hurt, right?
yeah. Stay away from it, Jim. I can see you're all excited to climb up there.
I climb up there every day.
I can
Jim,
see
if the
that. You
lighting-
get your
if
steps
the
in going
lighting-
up there.
Go up there
So
throwing the
anyhow-
beer bottles off the top, Jim.
I
Yeah,
think we
right.
should charge money. They have those at the gyms, a stair stepper. We could charge money for that. I'll put a toll booth at the top.
The
the
lighting,
ones
lighting in
you
the
want-
back, Jim, will make it a little less attractive to fool around.
Yeah,
the
Can
long
we
and
actually
short
get
of
a
it is-
camera to the police station there? Can we,
No.
can we camerize it?
No,
the police station does not want cameras all over town that they need to monitor.
I
And
mean, has there been any incidents involving that in the past?
No,
All right.
not that I know of.
Getting back to the original point. So
Thank
anyhow, we
you.
sent out a bunch of information on that. So if you guys could take a look at it, and see if there's any feedback. You know, it's just basically showing the thoughts of, you know, how we want to repair it. Once we get it settled, we'll set it out to bid and then we'll get numbers back in and we can see what the costs are and then make a decision on how to go forwards. But at least the positive part is at least we've got something that's pretty close to being able to go out.
Sounds good.
So,
Awesome.
all right. Anyhow, so that was about it. And I don't think we have anything to vote on, Kim. Do we have a meeting set for the PVC? Because going.
All right, I'm
forward?
leaving. Thanks,
All right.
thanks,
Thank you.
Rich, and everybody. Bye.
The last I heard for SBC, we had potentially this February 5th meeting. And then the other date that I heard thrown out was February 25th for like our regular monthly meeting.
Okay, so we have that in the calendar?
I believe so. I don't know if it was tentative or not. We should have asked them to clarify before they got off, but I'll check with them tomorrow
Okay.
and then send it around based on what they say.
Okie dokie. All right. Well, with that being said, unless anyone had anything else.
Yeah,
I-
Rich, so what's our timeline from here? So,
Oh.
pending feedback, when will we send this out or what's the gate or?
Well, I mean, if you guys can get back to us, we can have, it has to be sent out for, public bid. So we'll have to, the town administrator's office will send that out. Then we'll have a certain amount of time to get the bids back. I'm not sure exactly the time period. Once we get that, we can take a look at and qualify the bids and see where the total costs are. And then we can make some decisions on where we want to go.
So can you put a deadline on when people need their comments back? Otherwise they'll deem it be acceptable and we'll get this package out.
That's a good idea. How about, if we can have it back by 1 week from today? That would be great.
I think they look great. That's my feedback.
Yeah, I mean, they seem good to me, so.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. I mean, we can get out early. We do want to go back and look at it. There was on the eave space over there, there's some like weird plywood that's there. I want to actually pull a piece down and see what's behind it. I don't know why the plywood's there. And the whole idea is, initially we talked about maybe covering the bottom with basically a beadboard vinyl to clean it up. But looking at it a little closer, if we literally clean it up and paint it, we'd get the same effect at a lower cost, and then it'll look a lot better because it'll be original. So, that was some feedback that we got from meeting with the roofer.
When are you gonna go down there Saturday?
I haven't quite got to that point yet. I'm trying to make it through Wednesday.
Right.
Is that Rhino Shield stuff worth considering for something like that?
That I don't know enough about it, but that's a good question. I mean, we could, it's, not who knows? It's supposed to be lifetime, right? For me, that, for some of us, that lifetime is, 10 or 15 years,
That window's pretty short. Yeah, I'm with you.
So, all right. Anyhow, with that being said, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, great.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a
Good
good night,
night.
everyone.
Leave.